Opening scene, we see our protagonist Leonard Shelby, and he's standing over a dead body, and for a moment, time goes back in reverse. And then we see him waking up in some random motel. He goes down to the lobby and talks to Bert. He shows him a picture of Teddy and asks him who he is. But Teddy was already at the door, and he calls him Lenny. Leonard corrects Teddy by saying that his name is Leonard and not really Lenny. Teddy pretends as if he forgot, and then Teddy also tries to trick Leonard into mistaking his own car. If you're asking yourself, how can you trick an adult into mistaking their car? It's because you see, Leonard has this special condition. He has short-term memory loss. He can't really remember something that happened just a few moments ago. That's why he keeps Polaroid pictures of everything, and he writes little notes at the back. Anyways, Leonard and Teddy drive to this abandoned building. They head over there looking for something, and here we learn that this scene is actually a prerequisite to the previous opening scene that we saw. Here we see Leonard walking into the building, and on one of his Polaroids, there's a picture of Teddy, and at the back, it says to not trust him and that he's the one, and that he needs to kill him. This is when Leonard hits Teddy over the head, but before he shoots him, Teddy tells him that he doesn't even know who he is. He calls him a freak, and he asks him to go downstairs, he'll show him who he really is. But Leonard doesn't listen to him, he just shoots him. But how did we get here? How do Leonard and Teddy even know one another? To answer this question, we go back to the scene where Leonard wakes up and talks about his condition. He talks about how difficult it is and you need to have some kind of system to keep your thoughts organized. Cause moment to moment, you're just forgetting everything. Leonard also talks a little bit about Sammy Jenkins. Sammy Jenkins was somebody that Leonard knew who had the same conditions he did. He also had short-term memory loss. You see, a person with short-term memory loss only can't remember stuff that happens after their accident. Because you don't just get short-term memory loss, something has to happen to you. Something pretty bad, maybe like a shock to the head or something, and then you develop this very rare condition. So Leonard knows who he is. He knows where he's from, he knows a lot of things. He just has problems making new memories. So that's why he takes the Polaroid shots, and to keep some things permanent, he has a lot of tattoos. Like, a lot. And I'm gonna tell you guys now, the director of the movie, Mr. Christopher Nolan, also wanted to add the fact that even memory itself can't really be trusted. So on the next scene, we see Leonard leaving some diner. And then he goes to some motel, and he has this big mind map. And he also has this file from a person called Natalie. And the file is about someone called John Edward Gamble. And from a copy of his driver's license, we see that this John Edward Gamble person is also Teddy. Teddy and John are basically the same person. He calls his number, and Teddy picks up, and Teddy immediately recognizes that it's Leonard, and he tells him that he's gonna come over. Leonard doesn't say anything, he's like, okay fine, come over, and he looks at his tattoos, and there's a bunch of information about a person called John G. And this John G person is also supposed to be a drug dealer, and there's this new tattoo that also has his license plate. And looking at the information, it's the same license plate that Teddy has. And this is when Leonard adds to Teddy's Polaroid the note that says, he's the one, kill him. After adding that note, we see Leonard looking at himself in the mirror, and he has this old tattoo that's backwards. It reads, John G raped and murdered your wife. And then we see another past scene where Leonard is talking to somebody on the phone. Leonard doesn't even really recognize who's on the phone, and he asks if that person's called him before. And then again he talks about Sammy Jenkins, about how Sammy couldn't keep it together, but Leonard himself is very organized and he has a reason to keep his mind organized. And his reason is his wife's death. And you know how about 2 scenes ago, Leonard was just walking out of some diner? He went to that diner to meet Natalie, and on her Polaroid, Leonard wrote, she has also lost someone, and she will help you out of pity. And this is when Natalie gave him that file that contained Teddy's information. Apparently he's asked her for help before, and she's helping him out of pity, as he so thinks. And then we see another past scene where Leonard talks about his life before his accident. He talks to somebody on the phone about how he used to work in insurance. His job was basically investigating insurance fraud and making sure that the insurance to be paid is actually warranted. That's how he met Sammy Jenkins. And then we see another scene where Leonard and Teddy grab some breakfast, and Teddy tells him that Leonard told him that somebody was calling him claiming to be a policeman and was pumping him for information. And then we see another scene where Leonard keeps talking about Sammy Jenkins all over again. He talks about how Sammy and his wife got into this car accident. Nothing too serious, but this guy starts acting funny. He can't remember anything for more than a few minutes. He can't work, he can't really do anything. So his wife calls the insurance company, and the doctors check him out, and they find some very tiny damage to the hippocampus, but nothing really conclusive. And every time Leonard went to his house to investigate him, Leonard notices that Sammy is actually kind of recognizing him. So Leonard orders the insurance company to run more tests on Sammy. The doctors tell Leonard that people with his case can actually learn through conditioning. You do something enough times and you get this instinct not to do something you're not supposed to do. But when they test Sammy, he kept failing the test every single time. And because the doctor said that he should be able to remember based on instinct, and Sammy couldn't, Leonard concluded that his condition is not really physical, it's more of a psychological problem, and since his insurance doesn't really cover mental illness, they turned him down. And Leonard got a very big promotion. And then here we see Leonard waking up in some bathroom. He attacks this guy and he ties him up in his own closet. Looking through his Polaroids, he finds out that this guy's called Dodd, and he did it because of Natalie. He goes to Natalie's house and Natalie tells him who Dodd was and that he helped her with her problem. But then we also see that Natalie's actually using him, and she tells him that right in front of him. So Leonard's out to get his wife's killer, right? And Natalie's boyfriend Dodd is actually a drug dealer, and Natalie helps him out from time to time. And Natalie comes home one day, and since Leonard was staying there for a couple days, she tells him that there was this guy called Teddy that set up a drug meeting and took a lot of money from her boyfriend Dodd. And now her boyfriend is looking for her, and he's probably gonna kill her. And she tells him that, and Leonard just starts to get confused. And knowing his condition, Natalie takes advantage of him. She starts to insult his dead wife, he beats her up, she literally walks outside with all the pens in the house so he doesn't make a note of what happens, and just in a few minutes, she walks back inside and he forgets everything, and she tells him that it's her boyfriend that beat her up. And that's how Leonard ended up in Dodd's motel room, and that's why he knocked him out and put him in his own closet. And Leonard doesn't really care about anything. All he can think about is avenging his wife's death and her rape. How it actually happened was, he would wake up one night and he doesn't really know where his wife is. When he opens the bathroom, there were two guys giving it to his wife. He shoots one of them, but one of them slams his head against the mirror. And that's how he gets the short-term memory loss problem. And then again, we see him talking on the phone to some person about Sammy Jenkins. And how Sammy's story ended was, when him and his wife were denied the insurance claim, and his wife got stuck with the cash because Sammy couldn't work anymore, his wife was convinced that Sammy's problem was just psychological. And at some point, she was so convinced that he was just somehow faking it or was in some kind of delusion, and since his wife was a diabetic, and her husband Sammy always gave her insulin shots, one day, every 10 seconds she reminded her husband to give her another shot. And he did it 4 times, not remembering what happened because this dude is really sick. And his wife dies, and Sammy ends up in a home because he doesn't even remember that his wife died. This dude is really sick. That's what happened to Sammy Jenkins. And here we see one of the most last and most enlightening part of the movie. Teddy gives Leonard a lead on a guy called John G. Apparently, this is the dude that murdered his wife. He drives to the location of a meet that Teddy set up, and the guy shows up, and Leonard strangles him to death. And he hears another car pulling up, and he sees that it's Teddy. He looks at his Polaroids, and he has Teddy's picture, but he hasn't made any notes yet. He asks Teddy for help, pretending he doesn't know who he is. He gets him down to the basement, he shows him the body, and then he hits Teddy over the head. He looks at his ID, and he finds out that Teddy's a cop. At gunpoint, Leonard asks Teddy why the guy that he just killed talked about Sammy just before he died. He asks Teddy how the guy knew him, cause Leonard must have probably talked about Sammy Jenkins. And Leonard also asks him why the guy has about $200,000 in his car. He asks him if it's a drug deal, and Teddy tells him yeah, it's a drug deal. And then Teddy tells him why the guy called him Sammy. It's because Leonard talks about Sammy all the time, but it's not for the reasons that you think. Apparently, Leonard is Sammy. And you know how I told you guys that people with this condition, once they repeat something so many times, they learn to remember it? Leonard's actually trying to remember a story that never happened in his life. And Teddy tells him that his wife actually survived the assault, and she had diabetes. And Leonard actually killed her because of his condition, because she couldn't accept the fact that he had short-term memory loss. What Leonard was doing all this time, talking about Sammy Jenkins, was trying to rewrite a memory in his head. He's Sammy. He's the one that killed his wife by accident because she had diabetes and wanted to test his short-term memory loss. And because he knew he could condition his mind to forget that, he kept talking about the story replacing the elements with some guy. Yes, there was a guy called Sammy Jenkins, but he wasn't married and he was a con man. And Leonard actually did solve his case and proved that he was a con man. When I say that Leonard is Sammy, I don't mean that his name is Sammy or whatever, but he replaced the story. He came up with this fake story that he told himself so that he can condition himself to remember something that didn't happen. Now, how does Teddy fit into all this? Teddy was the guy assigned to Leonard's case in the beginning. And when the other cops didn't believe Leonard because of his condition, when he said that there was another attacker, Teddy did, and he helped him out. The problem was, Teddy's a crooked cop, and he knew that he could use Leonard to kill a bunch of drug dealers and take their money. And they've been going around from town to town killing a lot of John G's. And Teddy tells him that Leonard did find the actual guy that raped and killed his wife, and Leonard did kill him. Leonard tells him that he would remember if that happened, but Leonard also has one Polaroid that he can't explain, where he's smiling and pointing at the spot where he vowed that he would put a tattoo after he's killed the guy. Teddy tells him all of this. Leonard genuinely thought that he would remember after he caught the guy, and he did catch him a year ago, but he just doesn't remember. And Teddy tells him that Leonard himself has problems. Leonard doesn't really want to catch the guy. Leonard doesn't want the chase to end. When Teddy gave him the police files he stole about a year ago, Leonard took out like 12 pages because he wanted to be a loop. He knew that he could never remember taking revenge, so he always wanted to go around and kill someone called John G. And since Teddy was a crooked cop and an even worse human being, he just used Leonard's condition and he made him kill a bunch of drug dealers and he just took their money. Realizing this, we see Leonard taking Teddy's keys and he burns the 2 photos of the John G's that he killed, and he also burns the photo that he took after he killed the real John G. Cause Teddy's realized he can't let the chase end. His life is completely pointless without it. It's the only thing that he can remember. And on the very last scene, we see Leonard stopping at a tattoo store to get Teddy's license plate tattooed. As I've told you, that's the last tattoo that he had on his leg. And this is where we end up with the opening scene where Leonard kills Teddy. So who's the villain here? Teddy, who decided to use Leonard's weird condition? Leonard, who decided that he doesn't really want to remember the truth and he just wants to go on this endless revenge? Leave your comment in the comment section. This is by far the most complex movie I've recapped. I hope you guys like it. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you on the next recap. Bye.